Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Seed World Strategy webinar. My name is Alex Martin, and I serve as the editor for Seed World magazine, and today I'm absolutely happy to be your host. Our topic today is staying competitive in a soybean market, where we're going to learn what trends in soybeans are influencing decision at companies, as well as suggestions for growers. As you can see, we are going to be live tweeting during today's webinar, and we would love for you to join the conversation with us. So if you'd like to join that, please use the hashtag SWStrategyWebinar to connect with us. We'd also like to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded. So if there's any portion of the webinar you miss, or you just like to go back and give it a rewatch, that will be made available at seedworld.com. close to a couple of days from now. Well, and today we are going to hear from three absolutely fantastic speakers. We are going to hear first from Kurt Rahe, General Sales Manager of Burrus Seed. Second, from Ryan Fuller, Head of Soybean Strategic Marketing of Syngenta. And finally, third, from Mike Kavanaugh, Director of Product Development of AgReliant Genetics. After all three of our speakers finish speaking, we'll host a short Q&A at the end. That means if you have a question for any of our three speakers, whenever you think of that question, go ahead and type it into the chat box at any time during the webinar, and we'll address them during our Q&A session. Now, in today's webinar, we are going to be talking a lot about a topic that's kind of been growing in discussion, how to stay competitive in soybeans. There are so many traits and so many treatments on the market when it comes to soybeans, but really we are looking at how dealers and growers should know what to add to their lineup. So we're going to have an exciting discussion about what agronomic trends are influencing the soybean market and what that might mean for the upcoming growing seasons. And with that, I'd like to introduce our very first speaker of the day, Kurt Rahe. Kurt started his career in 1987 and spent the first 11 years of his career in sales and sales leadership roles, leading his sales teams to new heights. And he was actually instrumental in the launch of Roundup Ready Soybeans in the industry in 1997. In 2006, he was able to advance his career and began working with independent seed companies to grow their businesses by assisting them in the pursuit of helping growers increase yields with genetics from Monsanto through the Corn States organization. And after he moved back to his family farm, he actually became the general sales manager for Burrus Seed in Illinois, where he is leading the sales team across the Burrus sales geography. So thank you so much for joining us, Kurt. I don't want to take up any more of your time, so please take it away from here.
My pleasure, and good afternoon, everyone. As we think about how we want to stay competitive and how we need, what are the things that we need to do to stay competitive in that soybean landscape, I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the soybean trends that we're seeing in the soybean business, from yields to seed treatments, as well as planting dates. And what are some of those trends and how are they going to impact us even in the future? And then I thought I'd spend some time to talk around key decisions that growers face each year. And growers make 50, 60 decisions in each crop each year on what they're going to plant, when they're going to plant. And there's several decisions that I'd like to talk a little bit about here today. And then I thought I'd give you a little information around the Don Mario, a new brand that has entered into the U.S. market over the last couple of years, and we're fortunate enough to be partnered with them. And here in the state of Illinois and Missouri, Wisconsin, and part of our footprint that we sell in. So I thought I would spend a little bit of time talking about that, and then also a little bit about Burrus and how we go to market and how we work with our dealers to find the needs of our customers so that we can make sure that we meet their needs. So let's start off and looking at some trends that we have seen in the soybean industry. And if you look at this chart, you see that, to stay competitive, you need to kind of look back behind, but then also look at where we're going. Wayne Gretzky often said, hey, you got to go where the puck is going, not where it's been, to be successful. And I think about that regularly as I think about the soybean market per se. And if you look at the trend line here on this chart, you see that from 1960 to 1990, our yields went from 23.5 bushel per acre to 34.1. And we saw some nice increases. And if you look at that on an annual basis, it shows about 3.5 of growth annually over those first, I'm going to say 30 years. And then you look from 1990 all the way to today and what's estimated here in 2021, you see that we went from 34.1 bushels now to, it's estimated to be at 50.6 annually. So that is about, 5.55 bushel growth annually that you're seeing. And as you look at the chart, you'll see some peaks as well as some valleys. And some of those valleys, if you think back, to maybe where we had some droughts in 1988 would probably resonate with several of you in the audience. 2018 or 2012, 2008. So you see some of the years there where we had some challenging years, but not necessarily because the genetics didn't provide the opportunity. It was, I'm going to say, restricted with weather, if you will. So, really, how has this occurred? And it's really all about improved genetics with multiple breeding programs in the industry and how we can continue to see the growth of yield potential with each of these varieties as they get introduced. And you can expect, like I said, about 0.5 bushel on the newest and greatest varieties that are introduced annually. And how are we doing that? And that's really around disease tolerances. It's around getting better resistance and tolerance to phytophthora root rot, soybean cyst nematode, white mold, iron chlorosis. I mean, there's a lot of things there that breeders are continuing to work in to build resistance against those diseases. The other thing that I would add is, the introduction of herbicide tolerant traits. I happen to be involved with the introduction of Roundup Ready Soybeans in 1997. And it was an exciting time because growers were spending $60, $70, $80 an acre to control weeds. And then with the introduction of Roundup Ready Soybeans, they were able to significantly reduce their costs of herbicides and have clean fields again instead of walking their fields that they used to years ago, in addition to the herbicides that they were using. So, of course, now we're beyond the Roundup Ready soybeans, and there's been new traits introduced and went to Roundup Ready to Yield, and then Liberty Link and Liberty Link GT27. And then now we've gotten to, or the Extend, and now we've gotten to triple stack soybean varieties that of the Extend Flex and the Enlist E3 soybeans in the marketplace. And this has helped growers to continue to manage their weeds, fight off those resistant weeds to Roundup, and then maximize their yields. As you think about trends in the soybean industry, some other trends that we're seeing is seed treatments. You go back to 30 years ago as an example, growers were using seed treatment on their corn, but they were not able to use it on their soybeans. It really wasn't a big priority on their soybean yields. But if you think about that moving forward, in these last 30 years, I would estimate probably 80% of the soybeans that are planted today have a seed treatment on them. And that could be a seed treatment of a fungicide only, could be a fungicide and insecticide, could be a fungicide, insecticide, and nematicide. And then also some growers are also looking for the protection of SDS, sudden death syndrome, in their soybeans. And so they're asking for a treatment to protect against SDS. At Burrus, we've got multiple options for managing for our Power Shield seed treatment. There's different modes of actions that we use in our Power Shield seed treatment with fungicides, roughly 4 different fungicides and insecticide. And then if growers want the SDS, they can get that nematicide and SDS protection as well. Another trend that we look at here in the marketplace is around earlier planted soybeans. You know, it used to be growers would plant all of their corn and then switch their planter over to plant soybeans. Recently, we've seen where growers now are planting soybeans about the same time as they are corn, depending upon their field conditions. As we think about growers planting soybeans earlier, part of that trend has caused the seed treatment as well. They have more protection against several diseases such as Pythium, Phytophthora, Rhizoctonia, Fusarium. I mean, there's a list of different diseases that growers can get that protection from on their seed treatment. But over the last 10 years, we've also seen where soybean rates have declined here in the U.S. Many growers used to plant, you know, you would hear them say plant a bushel an acre years ago, and then or bushel and a half, but now it's more close to 130 to 140,000 seeds are planted per acre in soybeans. So as we've seen these trends, you know, we've been adapting accordingly, and with some of the new technology that's available out there, has enabled us to move planting date earlier so that growers can capitalize on higher yields and higher performance. As farmers are tasked with making hundreds of decisions annually, you know, when they want to plant their crop, what fields they want to plant their crop, they also have to create contingency plans. And as we think about contingency plans, you know, not only do you make your first plan when you plant, but then what are those contingency plans? I want to talk about some of the different decisions. You know, I mentioned that they're making 40 to 50 decisions per year on their crop. You know, what's their yield goal? It's going to depend on what their field average has been in the past, what the previous crop was, but what is the actual yield goal that grower is looking for? What's their fertility strategy? There's a lot of times when a grower may think that they can just get by with using the same amount of fertilizer that they put off or that was left from corn. But that might be the old way of thinking. But now there's really, you have to put a plan together on what's that fertility strategy. And then what's the weed management plan overall? I talked a little bit about this earlier with the herbicide tolerant traits. And, you know, what is their weed pressure? Do they want to use a dicamba-based herbicide as part of their program, and that's included as part of their pre and emergence program? Or do they want to use a 2,4-D with Enlist One or Enlist Duo? A lot of different options that growers have today that they can use, but decisions that they have to make is including what's their herbicide trait, what are their neighbors doing as well, and with some of the field boundaries that we have that we're faced with today. And then also prioritizing some of those characteristics that are important to a grower. You know, everybody wants high yield, but are you willing to sacrifice some standability for that highest yielding variety? Or are you looking more for a defensive product? What about emergence? You know, are you wanting something that's going to come out of the ground earlier? Or if you're planting later, how important is that? Because each of the varieties that are in the market today, growers have the ability to determine if they want a very fast emerging product or if they want something that is not as fast, but it'll come up as soil temperatures warm up. And then, like I mentioned before, what's the disease and pest tolerances that the growers are looking for, that they want to have resistance against built into the genetics of the plant. And there's a long list of them there that you can see, from Phytophthora to white mold to brown stem rot, SDS, cyst resistance. How important are those when selecting specific varieties for the grower? And then as we talked a little bit more about seed treatment, there are a lot of seed treatments on the market today. And a very important decision that a grower has to make regarding their seed treatment is, how much do they want to spend on seed treatment? What is it that they're wanting to help control? Is it about Phytophthora, Pythium, Rhizoctonia, some of the ones that I mentioned earlier, Fusarium, seed-borne Phomopsis, and other seed-borne insects and diseases? And as you think about that, as the growers think about it, what are the things that they need to be focused on, and how can they protect against some of those seed-borne illnesses, seed-borne deficiencies and infections, if you will. And so, as we think about that, we found that, we're able to consult with growers to help them make those decisions as they are making the final decisions on what they want to plant for the year. And I mentioned earlier that there's a new entrant into the marketplace named Don Mario. And Don Mario was able to bring in some new genetics into the industry. For those of you that may not be familiar with Don Mario, they're originally from Argentina and in South America. And it's the #1 brand that you see in Argentina. They were quickly able to capture that #1 market share position in Argentina, and really 5 out of the 7 countries that they sell in today. But it was a family business, started in 1982 when the Bartolome brothers started that business back in Argentina. And today it's a globally recognized brand. They've got significant market share, in the countries that I mentioned before, and really over 50% of the market share there in Argentina. As we think about them and the partnership with Burrus, they actually began testing soybeans here in the U.S. in 2006, and then started their own breeding program in 2007, immediately following. And so they've been here in the U.S. breeding soybeans and bringing in new genetics, new germplasm to the soybean industry for the American farmer for now since 2007. And that's enabled them to bring some elite genetics that is really new to the soybean industry here in the U.S. Today, they're testing at really 140 different research sites with over 400 and roughly 50,000 yield test plots across the U.S. They're officed here in Champaign, Illinois is where they're officed, and they've got a breeding program at Gibson City. And they have, like I said, they've been breeding since 2007 and have been able to bring a lot of new genetic diversity into the marketplace. We get a lot of questions around how does the relationship and how did it come about between Don Mario and Burrus? And quite honestly, that began back in 2018. And what we found as we were working with Don Mario and their leadership team, we found that, they had like-mindedness for success just like we did. We were looking for a long-term relationship for soybean genetics and a nice package of products to be able to deliver to our customers that fit right here in our footprints, where we have exclusivity of the Don Mario brand here in Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin. And they have strong growth intentions, and just like we have. And so it really was a nice marriage that we came together to be able to provide growers with, 1, unique genetics, 2, diversity in their genetics, and that overall unique germplasm out of their program is really how this came about, that we were able to partner with them, and they're partnered with other folks as well across the U.S. as they expand their market share with intentions to continue to capture and grow market share here in the U.S. As we think about that partnership and how does Burrus work with these growers, it's really, our objectivities for success consists of listening to growers. What are they telling us? What are their needs? What are the things that they want to do to improve their overall productivity on their farm? We want to learn their management practices and learn each of their fields so that we can help them meet their challenges and provide solutions to those growers that they face, and ultimately be their trusted advisor so that we can help them grow and prosper. And in return, they continue to do business with us so that we can grow and prosper as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Alex, and we'll take some questions here in a little bit.
Thanks so much, Kurt. That was a wonderful thing. I love hearing the trends that you're seeing, and I'm really curious to see what Ryan and Mike are seeing in terms of trends too. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our next speaker of the day. So our next speaker of the day is Ryan Fuller. Ryan Fuller is the head of soybean strategic marketing at Syngenta. He's actually been with the organization close to 15 years, and he's spent most of his career focused on soybeans. He began his soybean career as a product placement scientist in Central Illinois, focusing on late-stage development and product advancement of Roundup Ready to yield and extend soybeans for the Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio regions. And after a couple of years in this role, he took over the NA soybean product placement organization, where he and his team focused their efforts delivering high-yielding, broadly adapted varieties on both Enlist E3 and Extend Flex trait platforms. He's also held various roles in Syngenta's corn production and supply locations, and he most recently served as a corn product manager for the Golden Harvest brand. But again, I don't want to take up too much of Ryan's time, so thanks, Ryan, for joining us, and I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Appreciate the introduction. You did a better job with it than what I would have. So yeah, looking forward. Appreciate the opportunity to be in front of the group. I'm going to approach this a bit more from a seeds development aspect, is what Alex asked me to focus on. So dive into maybe a little bit further detail on some of the highlights that Kurt mentioned earlier about where soybean breeding's been, where it's going, what's been some of the big changes, and then possibly what's driving or has been driving some of those different changes. So if I think and look back over the last 5 to 10 years on what's really drove change within a breeding organization, analytics really comes to mind. And analytics is a big word that's thrown around a lot. But when I look at it, I think about it in 3 ways. It's really been about speed, precision, placement, and variety selection. And I'll dive into each one of those a little bit in more detail later. But when you think about speed, it's all about shortening that cycle time from new costs out to commercial development. It's also about shortening that cycle time where you go from, a line to when that line becomes apparent. And the more you can pull out of the end-to-end delivery, the faster you drive genetic gain. We've seen the progress that's happened over the last 50 or 60 years. But that ability to shorten life cycles throughout the whole process is significant and driving that progress forward. I talked about precision. I think this is maybe the biggest step forward we've made over the last 5 or 10 years. Precision, when I think about it, when it comes to a breeding program, most people look at a pipeline as a funnel. And the bigger the funnel on the front end, the more that comes out on the back end. And it truly was a numbers game for a lot of years. The more lines you could screen, the more you could select, the more you advance, the higher the likelihood of finding that commercial variety coming out the other end. Where the precision piece comes in is stacking the odds in a breeder's favor by really increasing the commercial probability of everything that goes into that funnel, so that you're starting with maybe it's a smaller pool, but that pool has already been really selected down, and then you fine tune as you go through the development stages. Placement and variety selection, I think, is another area that's made a lot of progress, and is really important as farmers and customers are making these seed purchasing decisions. It's a critical aspect that you only get one shot a year at. We got to make sure we get it right. So why is this all so important? If you think about the soybean market and where we've been, for a long time, herbicide trait platforms had a relatively long life cycle. Varieties within those trait platforms had a relatively long life cycle. But if you look over the last 10 years, there's been 2 or 3 new herbicide trait platforms launched. The time that they're active in the marketplace has been reduced, and varieties within that, the life cycle time or life cycle of an individual variety continues to shorten up. And so a lot of that's been driven by the need to control tough Roundup resistant weeds, which has also enabled a lot of innovation and created options that 10 years ago really weren't there. So if I look at diving into each one of these things in a little bit greater detail and highlight some of the things that we do at Syngenta, I mentioned speed. And we achieve this through our growth room facility in Clinton, Illinois. It's a state-of-the-art facility that is all about reducing cycle times. And it's reducing those cycle times in early generation breeding so that you can run multiple cycles a year in this type of environment that we've focused our efforts around minimizing the time it takes to go from seed to seed. We have capabilities to potentially do that in as little as 7 weeks. So the more generations that you can turn before you go outside creates this huge opportunity to shorten the time it takes to get new varieties to market, to solve farmers' challenges faster. Okay. This facility also gives us a great opportunity and can accelerate our capabilities in bringing new traits into high-performing germplasm. So I talked about precision, and there's definitely precision in breeding and managing germplasm and getting the most out of the capabilities, but precision is also really important when it comes to placement and variety selection. Now, I remember years ago sitting with my family members, and they pull out last year's plot book and look at the performance results and compare that against how things did on their farm and made their selections. Well, over the last 10, 15 years, there's more and more and more data available and being collected on everything. What I've seen over the last 5 years is the tools and capabilities to take that data that's been collected and turn it into information that can drive the decision-making process. So if you think about some of the data that's out there, there's soil information, there's weather information, there's biotic and abiotic stress information. We understand not only on a year, but within a segment or a growth stage of that crop that's happening out there. We have better information on each of the locations that we trial seed at, that we characterize and understand, is that environment represented in that location in a given year? Is that typical of what we could expect to see in that geography? Or is a location that we tested in the West actually more representative of an environment you would historically or have a higher probability of seeing in the East? And so it's not all about just what happened locally the previous year. This is a decision that the farmer has one shot at a year. So over the career, there may be 30 or 40 chances to get this right. And harnessing all that data and turning it into information has been one of the biggest step changes that's happened over the last 5 years, in my opinion. So once you've made that seed decision, certainly protecting the yield is really important. Disease has a huge impact on the crop every year. This does go into that variety selection piece, but this is one of the most critical things that you can do as a customer and a farmer to protect your yield is understand what disease resistance and tolerance is built into the genetics. So as Alex mentioned, I led the North America product placement team, and I walked my team through an exercise that we looked at just products that had experienced challenges in the industry across the last 5 to 7 years. And most of those that we would call challenges or even failures in the industry were due to either inaccurate or inadequate disease screening. So launching a variety that maybe you didn't know the SDS tolerance, or didn't have enough data to be real confident in the rating, or maybe soybean white mold was unknown on a variety or not available. So given the fact that we attributed most of those product challenges or failures to this inaccurate or inadequate disease screening, we've spent a lot of time and energy continuing to drive our capabilities forward. And these are just some examples. In the top left, you'll see Phytophthora root rot. That's a nursery that we run so that we can be confident in the information and the marketing ratings that we put out on each one of our new varieties for Phytophthora. It's not limited to just this location. We actually found a new collaboration 3 or 4 years ago that's done indoors that takes out that natural component, because you can see here this location obviously holds a lot of water and we're adding to it, but 1 in 5 years this naturally floods and you don't get the opportunity. So finding those ways to consistently deliver good product characterization information is really important. You'll see an example of soybean white mold, obviously a devastating disease. I don't believe anything is truly resistant. There's just varying levels of tolerance. And yeah, if you put out enough locations and you get the right environment, there's a high probability you'll find some opportunistic notes. But we made a targeted effort to find locations to install certain capabilities, whether it's the ability to irrigate, to mist, to create that perfect environment so that we can reliably screen our germplasm through the development pipeline, make early selections, and characterize our varieties before we go out to the marketplace. I won't dive into great detail on the other ones, but sudden death syndrome is something we're constantly working on. IDC is absolutely, we made a ton of progress there, but it goes beyond this to things like frog eye leaf spot, brown stem rot. Made some good progress with charcoal root rot over the last few years, and even working with pod and stem blight. So really excited about the progress the team has made and the impact it has to our customers. I want to call out a couple of key highlights here and what we offer. So high yielding varieties with leading herbicide choices. Kurt mentioned the different options that are out there in the marketplace and some of the benefits of each one, but behind ours, we've got 50 years of breeding for consistent high yield and key defensive traits. I'll walk through those key defensive traits, the energy and the focus we've put there. Broad offering of herbicide traits with Enlist E3, Extend Flex, Liberty Link GT27, and Roundup Ready to Extend. You pair all of this with a lot of the information I covered earlier around speed, precision, placement. Really excited about what Syngenta and the NK and Golden Harvest brands are bringing to the table today. With that, I'll turn it back over to Alex and look forward to questions here a little bit later.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Yes, and we are approaching our last speaker of the day, folks. So if you have questions for Ryan or Kurt that you haven't asked yet, go ahead and type them into the chat box below, and I'll make sure they get addressed in our Q&A session. But until then, our final speaker of the day is Mike Kavanaugh. Mike Kavanaugh is the Director of Product Development for AgReliant Genetics. In his role, he is responsible for commercial product direction, organization, management, testing activities, and seed treatments for all three of AgReliant's North America brands, AgriGold, LG Seeds, and Pride Seeds. Mike spends his time evaluating, directing, and fulfilling the commercial product needs as it pertains to genetics, traits, and seed treatments for all crops. He works closely with the research team and external product suppliers to ensure the best offerings for his customers. And he spent his life in the field, beginning his career in southern Indiana on his grandfather's farm. From there, he received his MS degree from Purdue University in 1994, where he majored in agronomy and weed science. And he's worked a total of 15 years in ag retail, dealing in fertilizer, chemicals, and seed, where he developed a wealth of sales and agronomic knowledge. He then joined AgReliant Genetics 16 years ago as a Southern regional agronomist for AgriGold. And in 2008, Mike transitioned to lead the AgriGold product and agronomy team. In his current role, he gets excited about the opportunity to strategize and discover the best products possible for AgReliant to deliver to its customers and to see results in the field. So thanks so much, Mike. And you get the honor of being our last speaker of the day. So I hope you have fun with it.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess now you know everything there is to know about me. So thank you for that introduction. So it's great to be with you here today. Alex wanted me to talk about some things as it pertains to soybeans. And I guess just to kind of set the stage, I'm here representing AgReliant Genetics today. And, of course, our brands here in North America are AgriGold, LG, and Pride in Canada. And, our mission in life is to go to farmers, help farmers grow, and sell them seed and service that seed purchase. Of course, we sell corn, soybeans, grain sorghum, and alfalfa. I think our claim to fame at AgReliant is definitely around corn research. We've got a very robust corn research program that we're very proud of, and takes a lot of efforts to get that accomplished, and we bring a lot of great products to our customers. I think our second claim to fame is certainly around the soybean offerings that we have. We don't have genetic research in soybeans, but the thing we do bring to the table is we work with the best soybean breeders in the world, and we're able to go to those companies, those providers, and literally go up and down the lineup from an early double aught group maturity to 5.0, and go up and down the lineup and find the best. And that's what our agronomy teams do a lot during the summertime, and evaluating product and making sure that we have the right soybeans to fit the geography all across North America. So I guess as we think about it, we have lots of salespeople, we have a lot of dealers, we have agronomists across the country that work with our customers. And, we're asked a lot of questions about the soybean business a lot. And one of them would be breeding trends. As we think about soybean breeding trends currently and in the past, I think you've heard from the speakers already. They've done a nice job setting the stage. But, you think about soybeans, in my mind, we're really starting to treat soybeans a lot like corn. And not just from a breeding aspect, but certainly from a management aspect and a production aspect as well. So as we think about breeding, really it is all about speed. It's all about speed to the marketplace. And, we're not going to beat that horse much more, but, you think about, in the corn world, the corn breeding world used to be, anywhere from 6 to 8 years. And that's really how it used to be in the soybean breeding world also. Takes 6 to 8 years to get a line finished and brought to the table. Now we're down to about 3 to 4 years. And, really this is brought on by several different reasons. I think one, definitely just like corn, the breeders are working with marker assisted breeding these days. They understand exactly what the product is that we're working with before they even start breeding. So that's pretty neat in itself. Multiple generations a year. I think that was hit on earlier today. But that's a pretty big point as well. Better predictive models. We think about how that soybean plant is going to look. The architecture, what it takes to actually weather the storm, weather the environment, and the agronomics that it takes. We're able to put those models together and predict what those soybean lines are going to be. Another one that has really increased the speed to the marketplace is just simply a larger, more robust testing all across the geography, all across the country, all across North America. And, you think about what the testing models that we're able to put in place today, not just from an in-field aspect, but just from a data accumulation and an evaluation aspect. It's just totally amazing how fast that has happened. And then finally, I think in my mind, really one of the huge breakthroughs is all about trait insertion. We heard about the first genetically modified soybean Roundup Ready earlier here today, but now we're into the stacks. We're into dicamba Roundup tolerance. We're into dicamba Roundup Liberty tolerance. We're into 2,4-D Liberty and Roundup tolerance. So you've got all these stacks going into a line, and basically all the genes are passed into that line at one time versus multiple genes being passed through. So that's definitely, that molecular stack is definitely a breakthrough in the market. So I'd certainly say that, the soybean breeding trends are certainly cut the speed in half from 8 years to 3 to 4. And that's been a major breakthrough in itself. I mentioned the new traits that have brought weed control. That's definitely a breakthrough. It's hard to believe. We lived in the glyphosate world only for about 20 years. And, since the mid 90s. And, before that, I think people remember, from 1985 to about 1995, if you could go out and identify weeds and come up with some kind of concoction to kill those weeds in the soybeans, boy, that dealer or that agronomist or that consultant, boy, they walked on water in those days. And of course, when Roundup Ready or glyphosate tolerance came, certainly changed the game. I remember those days. Some of the young viewers on the call here, you probably don't realize we used to spend anywhere from $80 to $100 an acre just on one post application, and also we would burn the soybeans about as bad as we could burn them. And I remember the old phrase was, well, just go fishing for a couple weeks and come back and they'd look great. But boy, we've come a long way. Now we have Extend Soybeans, that platform, the Extend Flex platform, and we've got the Enlist platform. And I do want to toot the horn of AgReliant Genetics, right now that, we offer all three platforms at AgReliant. We definitely bring options to the table, and because we realize that, our customers all across the country, they desire different platforms. They have to utilize different platforms for different reasons. So all those things, I think, have really been breakthroughs in soybean breeding trends. Not to mention, better disease tolerance, which has been mentioned today, with better SDS tolerance, white mold, the Phytophthora, so on and so forth. All these things coupled together have been breakthroughs, certainly. So I guess just to turn the page just a little bit, next question we get, especially from dealer point of view or even growers, what should we look for out of soybeans? What as we go into next year and following year, what should we look for? And really, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is yield always has to be at the top of mind. Yield, that's what pays our customers' bills, and we've got to make sure we couple that with strong agronomics. And I think from a dealer grower point of view, we have to make sure that the platform that we use has an operational fit. I think all these things together are definitely a key to success. When we think about balancing yield and agronomics, it is all about choosing the right variety. And varieties are just like corn hybrids, and corn hybrids are just like people. Every one of them are totally different, and that's the beauty about it. And so we have to make sure we choose the right variety to maximize that yield on every environment. We've got to match those variety strengths to the environmental challenges. If you go out in Kansas and Nebraska, those challenges are going to be a little different than they are here in southern Indiana. And our challenges are a little different than down in the Delta. And those challenges are different than Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. So whatever those environmental challenges are, we have to match those strengths. Finally, when we think about operational fit, that's really kind of a new phrase that we're talking about. And that's where, we have to determine the weed spectrum, the herbicide application details around that. And actually, folks, we got to check with the neighbor platforms as well. And I think everybody would understand what I'm talking about when we got to say, we got to check with the neighbors. It's just become all part of the ingredients of the operational fit of the soybean platform or system that we're using. So, that's really the first thing, balancing yield, agronomics, and that operational fit. And, I guess the next thing would be, how do dealers help growers make decisions? Folks, I think it's very simple. It's been simple for a lot of years. Dealers have to know customer challenges. They have to know the capabilities. Okay. They have to know those yield environments, and they have to help that customer develop a plan, and they have to keep it simple. Keeping it simple is worth a lot, especially at this day and age. For dealers to really stay competitive in the market, they just simply have to add value. And I think, like we said earlier, I think offering choices with multiple trait platforms, developing those plans, and ultimately just keeping yield at the top of the mind, that is definitely a way to add value. I think really if dealers follow this type of a strategy, it's a win-win situation for everybody. And we certainly see that on a daily basis. So Alex also wanted me to talk about outlook for soybeans for 2022. Maybe what are some red flags? What are some caution areas that growers should be looking out for as we think about making that decision for 2022? I will say, of course, soybean harvest is going. It has been going very well until some of these rainstorms have come through in the last week or so, specifically in the central and northern corn belt. But as we think about soybean quality, of course, so far so good. We definitely need this rain to shut off so we can get some more central soybeans harvested and conditioned, and the same for as we move into the south. And that's pretty much industry wide. So, but so far, quality looks good, and yields look pretty solid. So should be enough soybeans out there to make sure we satisfy everybody's needs at this point in time. But really from a grower point of view, caution areas for next year. I guess I think dicamba label uncertainty is kind of becoming the norm. Okay. What decisions are going to be made to the label, the state 24 C's, all that stuff that, it's definitely kind of, if you're playing in that arena, it can certainly make you pull your hair out sometimes. But that's certainly an area everybody's got to stay up on and understand. When those regulations come out, we got to understand what they are. The next thing that's pretty big right now, if folks haven't heard, inventories of glyphosate, inventories of glufosinate. Basically, when you think about brand names of, the Roundup style products or the Liberty style products, sounds like supplies are getting pretty tight, and for one reason or another. So that's definitely a caution area. So as you're making your decision, make sure you're working with your dealer, your chemical dealer of, hey, what are the options here for next year? And I do also want to point out that, as we think about those options, there are other options to, spraying soybeans. Sometimes we may have to, if inventories are tight, we may have to go back to identifying some weeds and utilizing some of those old-fashioned chemistries that are out there. Of course, another caution area is about growers planting multiple trait platforms. And, we try to say keep it simple. If you decided you're going to a dicamba Roundup scenario, and you want to mix in some Extend Flex, for one place or another, that's fine. Just definitely try to keep it simple. Put your Extend soybeans in one spot, your Extend Flex soybeans in another spot. Make sure that we're able to remember and document where those beans are so you can treat them a little bit differently later in the season. Same thing goes with your E3 soybeans. We see folks try to mix E3 and Extend soybeans from a customer point of view across the country, and folks, that can be very challenging. So really encourage everybody, go one way or the other. And there's a lot of soybeans and all those platforms, and there's definitely options and opportunities to be had, but just keeping it simple. Another thing that I'd caution folks on is steering away from varieties that were affected by the environment this year. Don't give up on really good varieties. We're seeing some things geographically this year. Some soybeans are maybe keeping their stems a little greener, maybe later maturing, maybe 3, 4, 5 days later in maturing than what they should be, or holding on to some petioles. I guess you have to remember the year. We, in some geographies of the U.S. this year, we had areas that went through some stress. Some of these soybeans literally went dormant. Late rains woke these soybeans up. They went ahead and yielded. They dried down, but those stems were still green, maybe even went down a little bit, and tough to pick up. The good news is they went ahead and yielded, but certainly be cautious about steering away from soybeans. Make sure that we understand the environmental impacts. And then finally, a red flag or a caution area, as always, with these high fertility prices, we are seeing and hearing customers thinking about, hey, maybe I just need to grow more soybeans next year. And, that's fine. But if you're gonna go that direction, definitely make sure you keep SCN, soybean cyst nematode, to the top of mind. Make sure you're choosing those soils that don't have super high SCN pressure. Make sure growers avoid those low fertility fields. Phosphorus, potassium, especially a low pH. You think about Rhizobium. Rhizobium is the organism that infects a root system early in the season and is responsible for creating nodules on those soybean roots. And nodules, of course, create nitrogen late in the season for those soybeans. So, keeping your pHs up, keeping a high calcium load in the soil is very important for Rhizobium survival. And then finally, you've heard it already today, plant varieties with good disease tolerances, and make sure, Pythium, Phytophthora, SDS, white mold, all those things are top of mind. But really kind of want to finish up maybe talking about, new trends in soybean management. And I'll leave you with a couple things. Growers are definitely planting earlier. We are recommending planting earlier because we see lots of yield from planting earlier. And, obviously, whenever you plant earlier, we're talking through the Corn Belt, anywhere late March or early April, the thing you got to watch for is that frost, that late spring frost, because it will kill soybeans if we get cold enough for long enough. But regardless of that, we're seeing growers planting earlier at lower pops and also getting away from the drills. Growers are planting with planters, planting soybeans with planters these days. Some are having luck with 15-inch rows. A lot of growers are still using their 30-inch row corn planter and planting soybeans, especially if we're doing it early. Through the central Corn Belt, we really believe that there's a happy medium somewhere through the middle of May when you can get away with a 30-inch row versus closing that row somewhere between the 10th and 15th of May. But, when we think about lower pops, we have to remember that soybeans, they're a bush plant by nature, and soybeans want to express themselves. So, we heard 130 to 150,000 earlier. Folks, we're working with a lot of growers that are planting 100 to 115 or 20,000. And even growers that are getting high yields planting less than that. So definitely a trend that we're watching and something to take in consideration. And then finally, we're watching growers manage their crop like corn. We're seeing them look for either planter, they're planting these beans and ensuring the proper depth, the spacing, paying attention to those little details, just like we do in corn. Of course, like we've already heard, using seed treatments, that's been a major breakthrough. We're fertilizing for soybeans. And finally, we're utilizing fungicide for soybeans as well. So anyway, that's what I have to offer here today from AgReliant Genetics in the soybean world. So Alex, I'll turn it over to you, and maybe we have some questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. He is right. It's now time to join our expert Q&A session. So Ryan and Kurt, if y'all like to turn on your cameras and join us as well. I know we're bumping up against our time limit, but we're going to try to get a couple of questions in here before we go. And so if you haven't entered a question into our chat box yet and you'd like to get it answered, please go ahead and do that, and we will work and do our very best to try to answer it. But with that, I'm going to start with Kurt. There was a question that came up during your presentation. I'm not actually sure if you'll have any information on this, but this question was directed at looking at kind of the proportion of GMO soy and non-GMO soybean acreage. So have you noticed a growth in one of those over the other? And do you anticipate seeing either GMO or non-GMO continue to grow in the future?
Actually, it's been pretty flat the last several years, because there are some markets where there's a premium that's being offered for conventional or non-GMO in some markets. And then you see some shifts. And so the trend has been in that 5 to 7% of the market has been non-GMO. And then that leaves the rest of the market being fully traded with a variety of different trait platforms, depending upon the weed management program and their weed pressure that they have with each of the growers. But that's kind of what we've seen over the last, I'm going to say, 5 to 10 years.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kurt. This one question came in, I think, right between Kurt and Ryan's presentation. So I'm not quite sure who to direct it to, but it also is kind of asking about what you folks have been seeing in terms of soybean seed use. Have you been seeing more use in the realm of soybean seed for animal feed, maybe for oil, or even maybe for human consumption?
Ryan, I'll let you take that question first if you'd like, since I just answered the last one.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Appreciate good question. I think the next 10 years will be really interesting in this space. There's lots of different opportunities out there right now. We hear about renewable diesel. We need to understand what percentage of the protein plate globally is going to be made up of plant-based proteins, how that impacts soybeans. So, it's a pretty interesting space on what the market is and what it's going to be over the next 10 to 15 years. I don't know that anybody has a real firm grasp on it. Some of us may have stronger opinions, but I do expect there's certainly opportunities that are going to be out there, whether it's human consumption, whether it's renewable diesel, whether it's aquaculture, as fish meal, things like that. So there's lots of opportunities. There's different end use markets. So great question, and I'm excited to see really where the opportunity goes and what market opportunities are truly out there.
Thank you. Perfect. Kurt, anything to add, or Mike?
No, Ryan did a great job of answering that, and we're curious to see. I know there's always a focus on creating new markets for soybeans, whether it be the high oleic market in soybeans or, more feed and food values. And so there's a lot of focus from research teams on that as we speak, and there will continue to be.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Then, Mike, the next question was actually directed to you at the beginning of your presentation when you were talking a little bit more about what AgReliant does. They wanted to know, what's the most important contribution you need from partners in the genomics research area?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess from a company point of view is just, as we continue to look at these breakthroughs with, genetics and bringing soybeans to the forefront is just probably better disease tolerance. One, it has improved over the years, but better disease tolerance genetically, it just has to continually improve. But probably the biggest one is figuring out a way to have better soybean cyst nematode tolerance. Of course, we've heard about the PI 88788 over the years, tolerance to cyst nematode. And of course, we've heard of Peking varieties. But, as we go from the traditional where we're at now, from the PI to the Peking, just continually get yield drags, continually. So if I was to say what is the thing we need the most, it's better SCN tolerance. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mike. Kurt, this question is actually for you. I was kind of curious. You mentioned early planted soybeans, and I've heard a lot about that with chatting with a couple of other companies as well. How is early planted soybeans affecting your selling time if they're getting planted along the same time as corn?
Yeah, good question. And a lot of times, the growers they historically have made their buying decisions in corn first, and then they'll make their soybean decisions a little bit later. And now there is a little bit of volatility in the market, with where commodity prices are and corn versus soybeans and the like. But the thing that we're seeing now with more and more growers is they're seeing the yield advantage of planting earlier in their soybeans. And they're not as concerned about frost as much anymore as they once were. And the protection of the seed treatments that we have been able to put on the soybeans to protect them from a lot of the soil-borne diseases, whether it be the Phytophthora, I went through the whole list, but to protect on those diseases with the seed treatments and the trend there that we talked about, we're seeing a lot better protection. So it gives growers more confidence. And quite honestly, growers have purchased planters to plant corn and soybeans at the same time and not waiting like they used to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And then Ryan, we've kind of heard what Mike would hope to see and what he thinks needs to be top of mind agronomic wise. But I wanted to pick your brain and just ask agronomic wise, what do you think needs to be top of mind for some of those field expectations right now for soybeans?
Yeah, I think it varies in every geography in almost every acre. Thinking that one thing will go across even a broad region. I mean, there's pockets everywhere. So I think it comes down to understanding potentially what the environment the previous year could potentially set you up for in the future. You have things like previous crop, and you also have some historical averages, right, in trends. We know areas where we expect or would anticipate a stronger infection of sudden death syndrome more years than not, right? Also, I encourage people not to, I get a lot of pressure and people ask me, well, you get that disease that's 1 in 10 years, right? And everyone wants to focus and jump to that. And, those 1 in 10 year things are difficult to manage. And, just make sure we understand the environment we had the previous year, how that impacted the crop, and is that typical of what you would expect to see the following year and years in the future. But also, I had to say something that goes across broad regions and acres. It's so geographical that a blanket statement wouldn't be appropriate.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan. And then, Mike, I'm going to let you take the last question of the day. And I think I know your answer, but I'll ask it anyway. But if you had a magic wand and you could make one thing disappear that is causing you grief in soybeans and the market, what would you have addressed in the future?
Wow. Well, it would definitely be around soybean disease, and you're probably thinking I would say cyst nematode. That's one of them. But I would have cyst nematode removed. I'd have white mold removed, IDC removed. But another one that hasn't been mentioned today is I'd have this thing called diaport complex removed. And of course, we heard Phomopsis earlier. But, if anybody has ever heard the phrase stem canker in soybeans, it's like saying green snap in corn. It is ugly. And, that's another thing we need, better tolerance to southern and northern stem canker in soybeans. You get into the Mid-South and east to west, all the way from Kentucky to Kansas, and stem canker can be an absolute disaster. So those are the things that I would focus on, Alex.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry to you three that we don't have time for more questions, but we're about 10 minutes over. So I'm going to have to go ahead and wrap up our webinar today. So thank you so much to our three experts, to Kurt, Ryan, and Mike, for joining us one last time. And I just want to thank everyone who stuck around with us in the audience. And we hope you found this information of value. If you missed anything, or if you want to go back and give this a rewatch, a recording of the webinar will be made available in the next couple of days at seedworld.com. Thank you so much again, everyone, and we hope you have an absolutely terrific day. This is Alex Martin of Seed World signing off. Thanks. Bye-bye, everyone.